I entered into an arranged marriage with little social or romantic experience. My husband, Jack, is the son of a small to medium-sized company's president. My family also runs a small company with several employees, and it seems our parents knew each other and arranged the marriage since we were suitable age of marriage. I lost my mother at a young age and was raised solely by my father, Thomas. Being an only daughter, he was concerned about my future and somewhat forcefully proceeded with the marriage arrangements. I've always been shy and not good at making friends. So after graduating high school, I immediately started working at my father's company. I had no experience with part-time jobs or going out at night. I wasn't interested in romance, so arranged marriage was actually convenient for me. I had a crush during my school days, but never dated. The only men I interacted with were my father and the male employees over 40 at our company. I never thought I'd get married, having almost no romantic experience. Fortunately, an arranged marriage came along, and I wanted to put my father at ease, so I readily agreed to it. My husband was 3 years older than me, but looked quite young. He joined his father's business after high school and was set to become the president in the future. The company was doing well, and honestly, he was quite my type. I fell for him during our first meeting, but I couldn't make the first move. Unexpectedly, he proposed during our second meeting, and I happily accepted, feeling over the moon. We got married after only meeting twice, and he became my husband. Our married life began at his parents' house. Since he was to take over the family business, he wanted to stay close and learn from his father's work. I moved in with his parents as he wished. His parents were happy that I could live with them, and I felt relieved that my father would be reassured. However, my expectations were quickly turned upside down just 2 days into the marriage. I lost my mother when I was little, so I can do housework. Or so I thought. In the morning, when I got off in the living room to make breakfast, before my husband got up, my mill had already woke up.
Oh, good morning. It was late. Did you clean the entrance?
I was surprised. It was 6 a.m. Sorry, I'll clean it right away, I said and hurriedly went to sweep the entrance. So cleaning the entrance is the first task in the morning here. I resolved to wake up earlier the next day. After preparing breakfast for 4, Jack got up around 7 a.m., but didn't immediately eat. Instead, he lounged on the sofa and was watching TV.
Shouldn't you serve tea and the newspapers first when your husband wakes up?
Susan remarked while eating her breakfast. I'm sorry. I handed tea and newspapers to my husband. My husband doesn't look here and reads the newspapers while drinking the tea. I need to learn more about this. I reflected on my lack of experience and tried harder the following days. Initially, I thought Susan's criticisms were due to my inexperience and compiled without question. Eventually, I had a daughter, Emma, and balancing child rearing with household duties became more challenging. Susan didn't help with either but continued her daily criticisms. I believed these were due to my shortcomings. One day, it became unable to endure Susan's constant nagging. I consulted with Jack. Your mother complains about me every day. I can't take it anymore, I said, tears streaming down my face. But Jack dismissed me, saying, That's your fault. I'm going to break myself if I leave it as it is. So I said, I have something wrong, of course, but my mill says more than that. I was used for stress relief. I want you to deal with it. I was truly at my breaking point. But my husband, Jack, said something shocking. I married you despite your immaturity, and now my mom is trying to make you mature. Can't you see that? He snapped back at me angrily. But your mom's behavior is too much, I retorted. Suddenly, Jack calmed down and said, if you're going to say bad things of my mom, we might get divorced. Go back to your parents' house. And then he left the room. I couldn't comprehend his words at first. But as I gradually calmed down, I remembered and the idea of divorce crossed my mind. Either way, it seemed like Susan would interfere. So I decided to return to my parents' house for the time being. The next day at my parents' house, a divorce paper arrived from Jack. I was ready to go through with the divorce. However, my father, Thomas, opposed it. Perhaps he was upset about his only daughter getting divorced so soon. I tried hard to explain the situation to him, but he insisted that I endure it. Come to think of it, Thomas was always lenient with Susan and strict with my mother. Maybe he was also concerned about how it would look for his daughter to return home divorced. In the end, Thomas took me back home, and I had to apologize to Jack and Susan, returning to things as they were. But from that point on, Susan's nagging escalated. One day, as I was busy with housework as usual, Susan said, "Tea?" I was a little nervous, but I offered tea by saying, "Yes." It was the first time Susan had asked for something like that from me. I had been doing the meals, cleanup, and other chores, but she had never asked me to bring her tea or anything else. I thought maybe she was tired, but from the next day onward, it was always tea, newspaper, and she never moved from the sofa. Then, during a meal, she started, "Oh, it tastes too strong today. Are you trying to make me sick?" I said, "I'm sorry. I'll cook it again." To which she replied, "No need. It'll probably be the same anyway." She continued to complain as she ate. I had always received small criticisms about my cooking, but this time it was combined with spiteful comments. I was a little frustrated, but I had no choice but to apologize. I said, "I'm sorry. I'll be more careful after that." My husband and Phil are laughing while watching TV, and they don't care about us at all. Only my daughter is looking at my face with anxiety. I didn't want to show her me being scolded, so I just responded, "Understood," and ignored Susan's comments. But perhaps that annoyed her. She even started to scold Emma. It's the parent's responsibility if a child has no manners. It's because you have no manners that your child is rude, she would say loudly in front of my daughter. Finally, I asked her, "Please, Susan, speak a little softer," to which she hysterically shouted, "You raised her that way. It's your fault. Are you trying to make me the bad guy?" Even Jack looked concerned but defended his mother when I explained, saying, "Well, can't help it." Since then, Susan would call me over to scold me for every little thing. I used to think it was my fault, but not anymore. It was just her wanting to bully me. Realizing this, I began to feel a strong aversion towards her. But living together, I had to see her face every day. Even when I wanted to visit my parents, she would complain, "Planning to neglect your duties here? You've become quite arrogant." Thinking of the nagging I'd face upon my return, I rarely went back home after getting married. During this time, my father, Thomas, died in a car accident. It was so sudden that I was in shock and couldn't listen to Susan's nagging anymore. I rushed to my parents' house. I don't remember much after that, being too busy. The company my father ran couldn't recover after his death, and it eventually closed after paying severance to the employees. A family lawyer handled everything, so I could stay beside my father's portrait. Then the lawyer told me about an inheritance from my father. As an only child, there were still some properties left even after paying the employees, which were designated as my inheritance. Despite not visiting or contacting my father much after marriage, he always took care of me. Mixed feelings of happiness and regret made me unable to stop crying. Then I learned the inheritance was a substantial amount of $1.2 million. I was surprised, but Jack seemed even happier. He was with me when I heard about the will. My husband can't hide her happy feeling, and he seems to be full of heritage, even my father's death. Watching him, I felt the same disgust I had for Susan. Jack, who pretended not to notice me being bullied by Susan. Jack, who didn't help with child rearing or even put effort into his father's business. Just lazed around all day. I swore to myself. Who says I have to give him the inheritance? And began to consider a plan. Then, as expected, when everything was over and came back home, Mill was waiting for me. Expecting her usual nagging, I was surprised when she said, "You must be exhausted. Take some rest." I hadn't received a single word of sympathy from her in the decades since we married. I was speechless at her sudden change, but then understood why when she said,
By the way, I heard your father left you an inheritance.
"That explains it." My mill was aiming for my inheritance. I realized my feelings had shifted from anger to hatred. Trying to hide my emotions, I calmly replied, "Yes, that's true," while suppressing my resentment.
It's going to be busy from now on. Our company needs some updates.
She was planning to use my inheritance to revamp her company. To think they could talk about such things so soon after my father's passing.
Yes, cars are getting old recently.
My husband chimed in, clearly in a good mood. Both Susan and Jack speak like that. It was too much. I can't control my hatred emotions. My daughter, who noticed my incident, took me to the room, saying, "Mom, let's take a break." That helped me get through the situation. After that, Susan's constant criticism stopped abruptly. Every day, she and Jack were happily discussing plans to revitalize the company and looking at catalogs for new cars. I endured each day, suppressing my feelings of resentment. Then, boldly, they handed over the company's presidency to Jack. He started spending money recklessly, giving out bonuses to employees and investing in new equipment. The employees, initially puzzled, became excited about the new president, and the company was bustling with activity. Gradually, our house was updated too, even getting new appliances for the household chores I did. For a moment, I thought maybe life could continue peacefully without criticism. But thinking of the decades of mistreatment and how they were now using my father's inheritance as their own, I knew I had to go through with my plan. The day to execute my plan arrived. It was the company's recreational trip. They had never done such a trip before, but this time they decided to take all the employees to a hot spring resort. Of course, I was not included. Jack and his parents left cheerfully for the trip. That's when Emma and I started our plan. Right after they left, I called the moving truck I had arranged earlier. Slowly, we packed up our clothes and personal belongings and loaded everything onto the truck, heading to the apartment I had previously purchased. After my father passed away and I returned home, Emma and I had decided to buy an apartment to live in, just the two of us. There is no problem with the furniture that I bought little by little in the immediate life. In the past, Susan kept a close eye on me, and I couldn't freely go out. But recently, she had started going out more and let me leave the house without any complaints. I took advantage of this and bought furniture and appliances for our new place. It was somewhat surprising that Emma was on board with the plan. She has a similar personality, and she rarely opens her mouth at home. Sometimes she just talks about her school life with me. Emma had always known that Susan was mistreating me and had always stood up for and supported me. Whenever Susan was in a bad mood, it even affected Emma. My daughter couldn't stand it and agreed with this plan. Susan had almost forbidden me from going out with Emma, claiming that it would neglect the housework. It was truly a happy feeling to be able to go shopping and visit our new apartment with my daughter, something unimaginable before. Meanwhile, Jack and his parents were blissfully unaware at the hot springs. I regretted not being able to see their surprised faces when they returned the next day. When they returned from the trip, I was no longer there. Soon, Jack called, furious.
What the hell is this? Where are you?
He suddenly shouted at the phone. What do you mean? I can't live with your family anymore. That's why I left the house. Emma is with me. Calmly, I replied.
What? After all these years of supporting you, who's always been immature?
Jack must have always looked down on me. That's why he never said or did anything when his mother, Susan, bullied me. I regretted not realizing his true nature after all these years together. But now, I felt no love for him.
I won't accept this.
Jack continued. Accept or not, you're a stranger to me now. I replied.
What? We haven't even signed divorce papers.
He scoffed. But I also laughed back. You're saying something weird. You've been giving me a divorce notification before. In fact, I had kept the divorce papers. He sent me when I was previously driven out of the house. After my father's death, I filed the papers as part of my plan. So, Jack and I had been no longer family for quite some time.
What?
He seemed lost for words. Then someone snatched the phone and I heard a familiar voice.
Do you realize what you've done? This is a crime.
Susan's voice rang in my ear, sounding almost nostalgic. Calmly, I responded, It's not a crime. You signed as a witness, didn't you, Susan?
That was a long time ago. Bringing it up now.
Susan started screaming at me. I've endured your criticisms every day. Even after receiving the divorce papers, I stayed. But now, you're spending money recklessly, expecting my father's inheritance.
Well, that's...
Susan tried to make excuses, but I cut her off. I'm done with that life. The divorce papers were just sitting there, so I filed them. Is that a crime? She couldn't respond. I concluded the call with, Thank you for everything over the years. I'll be living happily with Emma now. Take care. I said that and hanged up. My long revenge was over. Afterward, Jack and his parents faced the consequences I anticipated. The money they splurged, expecting my inheritance, turned into debt, and their company eventually collapsed. They couldn't repay the debts and had to sell their home. Jack, unable to find a stable job, struggled with day-to-day work. Susan, after the company failed, turned to alcohol and was admitted to a hospital. It is also suspected of dementia. As for me, I started working part-time, my first job experience. Having married through an arranged marriage and being sheltered from society, it was tough at first. But now I find joy in earning my own money. Emma has found a job and is working hard in the company. After my arranged marriage and the struggles I faced, I want her to gain life experiences and find a partner that suits her. I'm not my second life for me, but I'm going to have a fun life for myself.